Okay, just want to talk about Elvis and his ideals and stuff like that of being a custom-made man and shit like that. Choices and shit that people take in their life, me included, my father, in career and stuff like that. And it's a little bit dark in here, so I might just open the door. Sort of interesting. I've had my brother-in-law say to me, when are you going to get serious in a career and stuff like that? And I said, look, honestly, I get bored shitless of jobs and I leave them. And the longest I ever hold down a job for is 2 years until I just cannot fucking stand a place and I leave. And he said I wasn't necessarily talking about work in for somebody else, you know. That's not necessarily the case, was what he was trying to say, working as a ham and egger for someone else. I've had the pastor say the same thing to me. You're a lot better than being a ham and egger, you're too smart for this, you can do better. I have had opportunities in the past. I used to, during my apprenticeship, I was essentially not learning any fucking spray painting, but I was essentially a steel handler. As I was earning $5 an hour, there were guys down in the capital on construction sites doing the exact same thing, chaining up the exact same beams that I was chaining up, but they were taking them off the truck at the other end when they got to the building site. They were on $80,000 a year back then, some even more, $100,000. Now it's $120,000, $150,000 a year to do that same shit that I'd done for basically a year and a half straight in that apprenticeship. Actually slightly more, but anyway. You know, it's one of these things where it looks like the dream job. If you're a 16-year-old boy walking past a construction site, it looks fucking cool seeing these massive big beams being lifted up by a crane onto the fucking 5th floor or whatever the fuck. It looks groovy, you know, and even other tradespeople think it's groovy. I remember when we were doing plastering, we basically had some plaster lifted up to the top floor by a crane, like shitloads of this plaster that we had to put, because it was not realistic to walk it up fucking 3-4 flights of stairs. So we got a crane to lift it up. And they'd drop down a pallet and we'd remove all the stuff off that pallet, and then, you know, the whole lot of us were there. There was honestly like about 14, 16 people unloading these pallets, and then they'd drop another pallet in, drop another pallet. This dude was on fucking big dollars doing this, you know, and I've got the license and everything to do all this shit, you know. I've done it physically for a year and a half. I've got the license to do it. You know, there's the fucking hand signals. I memorised all that shit. There's your whistle, which is a little bit harder to memorise because I didn't do it very much. But generally speaking, now they use radios instead of the whistle. They all know how to do the whistle, but nobody uses it anymore. Unless it's in a flammability area, such as an oil refinery is about the only time they don't use oil radios for that sort of. Anyway, long story short, it looks as cool as fuck. Even to other tradespeople, but especially as a teenage boy walking past a construction site. The reality is it's fucking boring. It's so incredibly boring. Lifting this shit up, dropping it back down, you know, and I think the boredom would have killed me, you know. Like most jobs, I wouldn't have done it for any more than 2 years, even if I was doing it on the construction site. It would have drove me nuts. I don't know if the money would have helped, but realistically with me, the money has never really helped. It doesn't matter if I'm, you know, and I've been clearing fucking, you know, $8.50 a week and shit like that. Not a month, a fucking week, and it's still, jobs get boring for me, and it's because I don't have a lot of overheads and stuff like that, you know. It's not like, you know, and the active mind that I have, the mind that's always wanting to learn shit and investigate shit, gets bored with repetition. It's as simple as that. I look at my father, who, you know, he trained part way to, his mum wanted him to become a maths teacher. He trained part way into civil engineering, you know, and the shit that you would do on a graphics calculator, he can fucking do on a piece of paper, you know, and he could have done a hell of a lot better. They used to often tell me that during the 1980s, I mean, we lived in a house as part of his job that was just provided as part of the job, but they had another property that they owned up in another city, and they were renting that out. In all the years they owned it, they never actually spent one single night sleeping in that house. Not even one. Not even one fucking night. But they rented it out for years. They paid it off for completely, and ultimately they sold that house to pay for the building of the house they now live in over here, in this side of the country. Anyways, long story short, he used to tell me that they had plenty of extra money back in those days of the late 80s, early 90s, and I said, why didn't you invest in gold? And then, you know, this is a later point, I said a couple of weeks later, why didn't you invest in gold if you had plenty of money? Oh, I didn't have plenty of money, we were struggling to survive, fucking blah, blah, blah. Well, it's different what you told me a few weeks previously, and what I've heard for years, that, you know, we were pretty well, we had plenty of cash in our pockets, apparently. But the story changes as soon as you say anything, of course. It's one story when you don't have an opinion, and as soon as you have an opinion, the story's going to change. We have a friend who, it's actually my mum's, they were school friends as little kids and everything. She married a guy who ended up basically being one of three guys to own a software company. Now these three guys, and he was one of them, completely owned this company that sold software overseas and had a lot of, you know, a fair amount of clog, and he's essentially sold that company along with the other guys. The price was right, and they sold out, and he's basically got back into now robotic related software for actually cabinet making, robotically controlled table saws. And, you know, the dude's basically a software millionaire. When you see his choice of cars and how often he changes them, trust me, he's a fucking millionaire. There's no question about it. Last time I saw him was at my grandparents' funeral. He's driving a long wheelbase V8 Mercedes, V8 BMW 7 Series that, you know, was about 3 years old, and the cost of that thing would have been enough to choke a fucking donkey. And here he was in yet another new BMW, or near new BMW. He's, ever since they sold that company, he's likes changing his cars a lot more often. And they're always bloody expensive BMWs. None of these little pipsqueak ones, always the big ones, always the V8s. And yeah, that guy used to employ people as programmers with no previous experience at all. When we come back here to this state, when my parents come back and I come here to live permanently for the first time, he was employing guys in those years on a pretty flaming fantastical wage, damn near double the average ham and egg wage, with no experience necessary with computers, and he would teach you how to program computers. This dude is a family friend. He was employing other people just off the street on double a ham and egger's wage with no experience necessary, in the hopes to teach these guys to be programmers. And with the brains my father had, he easily could have done that. However, I don't know that he would have lasted in an office environment. So he continued to be a ham and egger, digging post holes and fucking around with grapevines, planting grapevines and setting up irrigation lines and fencing and all that shit in a vineyard, you know. A lot of people can do a lot better for themselves, but whether they could necessarily hang in those jobs for years at a time, that's the big question. I will admit, from having had a business for a short while myself, your motivation is far more than you ever knew it could be when you own the business yourself. You will work twice as hard or 2.5 times as hard as you have ever worked before. In fact, you'll work so hard that you didn't even know you had it in you when you have your own business. Trust me on that one. I sort of look at Elvis, and I mean, I know he's not the brightest bulb in the bunch, to put it lightly. But you sort of look at his idea of business, alright? I'm going to flip into a bit of stuff from Rich Dad Poor Dad here in a second. The guy's got this idea that all you got to do is look the part and you are it, you know. So he dresses up in a suit and marches around the fucking Walmart car park with a custom-made free agent CEO in the title of all this stuff, you know, and fucking blah, 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 blah. He's got this idea that you wake up out of your van, you're how old is it, 1989 model? What are we looking at? 27-year-old van with a ticking engine that can't even run at full speed after dumpster diving for food, and you go from that one day to being somebody else's boss the next day, and you're the boss, alpha male boss, custom made, and everybody else is running around for you. You don't fucking move from dumpster diving the night before to being a boss that big the next day. It doesn't fucking work that way. But I sort of look at this dude's experiences, his family. I mean, you look at his family. His family isn't fucking hobos. They're upper middle class. These are the people with money in their pockets. And you can tell that by looking at his family that he showed at Thanksgiving. And the fact of the matter is that his father made a go of things off his own back. Now, whether you agree with guys who buy wholesale vehicles and sell them out of their fucking garage or not, whatever. You know, I know one person has seen that sort of stuff because they've been in the wholesale car industry and they don't like it. Over here, it's actually a lot more common to do that sort of stuff. If you're a smart enough cookie. Not a great deal of people do it, but there are people that I've known that have done that sort of stuff. One guy used to get ones that were pretty badly smacked up, and you know, when it was a lot easier to fix a write-off, paperwork-wise, now it's damn near impossible. It's not worth fixing a write-off. He used to fix write-offs and sell them, and he'd make money doing that. You know, and I saw a number of the vehicles that he'd done. You know, and that was, hey, it was what he'd done. And you know, I may be moving not into that direct vein, but into a similar sort of thing, buying stuff that's pretty fucked up and fixing it up and not necessarily selling it, but maybe hiring it. Anyways, Elvis has been in the position where his father has done this. He's bought wholesale vehicles and he's resold them. His father sat there and said, what I can make in one car sale is more than what you make in an entire month of ham and egg. This is the thing. While his father was out there fixing up vehicles, instead of going out and learning some fucking shit, like how to change brake pads, for instance, so you don't need to get a mechanic in Florida to do it. You know, things like, should be changing wheel bearings, slave cylinders on brakes. He should have been doing all that sort of shit, and I'm sure his father was doing a lot of that stuff. You know, it's easier than you think to replace the fucking wheel bearing too. He had the opportunity to do all that shit. I see my father do a lot of that shit. I have learnt not as much as I should have, but a decent amount of that off my father. I've got to learn more, you know. I can do some things, you know. I've pulled out fucking push rods and tappets and cleaned out tappets and reassembled them in a car, put the push rods back in. I've done that single-handedly when he wasn't at home. You know, brake pads are like fucking falling off a log. I could do that with the hand tied behind my back. You know, these things are easy enough. But Elvis had the chance to see this all the fucking time throughout his childhood. What was he doing instead? He was sitting inside like a fucking fat kid on fucking jelly beans, which is probably quite literally the case, watching WWE wrestling moves and copying Ric Flair sayings and statements and phrases. Oh, fuck. I mean, he might not have had the brains to be a friggin' qualified accountant or anything like that. Not that I'd want to be a qualified accountant myself, but he had the brains to do something other than Ric Flair impersonations in his fucking life. You know what I'm saying? Like, he could have done better than where he is now by a fucking long shot. Because all he can do now is eat, make rants, and do Ric Flair impersonations and talk shit about the God ashore and the fucking Anunnaki and all that sort of shit. This dude had the opportunity to walk in his father's footsteps. And trust me, although he's clueless, well, you know, it took him 3.5 hours to replace a little bit of vent hose with 2 hose clamps. So maybe he wouldn't be good enough to fix cars up. But I'll put it like this. There's some dumb bastards who went to school with me and they are now at the front desk at Auto Wreckers. One of them I went into a GM Auto Wrecker after actually a 12-volt fan to try and make some sort of an evaporative cooling system for this place a while ago. And yeah, there was a guy I went to school with who was a school dropout who was behind the desk at this GM Auto Wreckers. And he wasn't the smartest tool in the shed, but hey, he works in an Auto Wreckers. You bring him a fucked up GM and he could probably fix that bitch in 2 hours, new parts and everything, fucking, you just whack him straight on like a fucking Grand Prix wheel change, even though he's a school dropout, you know. And this is the thing. Elvis probably had a lot more chance to be able to learn something off his father, even if he never followed through with it, at least to be a better mechanic, to fix his own shitbox van, you know. And here I see Rosie trying to explain to him what a vampire short is and how to trace down a vampire short that's drawing power. The dude doesn't understand volts from amps or anything. Just nothing. And yet there's all that potential that he could have gone ahead. And, you know, his father would have felt that he was stepping on his toes if he took it on the same town. He could have moved to another fucking town. He could have gone to Chicago with the rest of his family and done it in Chicago. He could have done it in another state. He still could have done a similar thing. Or if he loves RVs so much, don't sell cars in competition with his father. Find RVs with fucked engines or fucked whatever, re-waterproof them, fit out stuff inside, do whatever, and change the blown transmission. They seem to have a lovely tendency to blow transmissions, so they reckon, with these RVs, you know, and achieve something. But I don't know if he had the mental capacity to do it. But as I said, I've seen some people who are no good with other things who are very good with vehicles. And you sort of look at that and he's just lost, you know. And this whole rich dad, poor dad thing, I mean, I've only seen a quick summarised version of that. My sister has seen a lot more of it. And the fact is that they split people into 3 categories in terms of the way they spend and whatnot. There's the poor, the middle class, and the wealthy. The poor get their pay and they go blow the whole lot on fucking alcohol and clothes and pointless bullshit. The middle class are paid more, often do professional jobs, and they spend their money on big things that they call assets that aren't actually assets. They're bigger things like properties, like cars, more expensive things, RVs, boats, whatever. And they call them an asset, and while they have a resale value, they're not actually an asset because they don't earn money. And then there's the wealthy. The wealthy buy shit that makes money. They don't buy a car and say, oh, you know, it's an investment. This car's an investment. It's an asset. No, it's not. The value of the car's fucking dropping like a stone as you're standing there talking shit about how good the fucking car is. An investment is what makes you money. An asset is what makes you money. And that's what the wealthy understand, that you've got to have stuff that makes you money. And this is another big thing I've heard before, which was also part of all this. And I think this is mentioned in the Rich Dad Poor Dad thing. It's not so much about how much you earn, it's about how much you retain between when you earn the money and when you spend it. Some people earn a colossal amount, like this guy's dad. His dad earned a colossal amount and then spent every fucking dollar he got. Whereas his friend's dad didn't even finish high school, didn't earn jack shit, but hung on to most of what he had and barely spent any, and anything he did spend was only on things that would then make him money. The guy then went on to become one of the richest guys in Hawaii, even though he never even finished high school, versus his own father, who was in a terribly high-paid job but fucking blew everything he got. You know, and that's the difference. I've even heard that said when I was in working for a particular place, well, actually back in 2010 for a few weeks there as the whole housing market was falling to bits. We were dealing with something that was involved in building new houses, and they said to me, some people become rich because they know how to make money, and some people become rich because they're a tight ass, and our boss has become rich because he's both a tight ass and somebody who knows how to make money. so yeah, but it's one of these things, you know, and this is the phase I'm sort of trying to move into, is one of these things of getting investments rolling. You know, silver and gold's good, but the return on other things is a lot better than silver. Sure, it has a gradual, slow gain over time. You know, it has its small ups and downs, but it gains better than inflation over time. I will admit, at times it performs the fucking pants off of any of these damn bank funds you can, you know, you're not going to get 5% back, you know. Like, with a bank fund you can get 5% back. Let's face it, in the first half of 2016, silver jumped 39% or 43% or something like that in the first 6 months of 2016. That's a whole lot better than 5% interest a year. But then, when you've got stuff that's actually out there producing money on a daily basis for you, you'll realise that the return on investment isn't 39% or 43% in 6 months. It isn't 5% in the whole year. It may well be 800 or 900% a year. Easily. Some of these things are 2,000% a year. Easily. And at that point, you know, shit gets rolling, and you can go quite well off of that. But as my sister said to me, there's people who go out and buy themselves a suit with the handful of dollars they got from work in a shit ham and egger job this week and prance around dressed up like they're fucking Mr. Cool. Then there's Elvis, who has someone give him a fucking suit and then dress around like he's, dance around like he's Mr. Cool. But the real rich people dress in fucking old company clothing that they got off a company they used to work for, and pants with fucking holes in the pants and hang on to everything, and then what they do get, they make investments with and make money out of. And yeah, she told me that's simply why Elvis will not get anywhere, because he will not do anything like that. And you don't sort of go from dumpster diving one day to fucking being someone's boss the next day. The guy doesn't have a plan. His plan is just to be top knob with all the glory straight away, and it doesn't happen like that. There's a path to it. There's a plan to it. It takes step one, step two. You got to do things, and that's a big thing where he's fucked altogether. You got to actually do things to get somewhere. Other than sit in a van and mooch free Wi-Fi all day while you make rants about fucking everyone from your former donors to Nomadic Fanatics Cat to the God ashore to who's going to spend 60 minutes getting shagged in his 27-year-old camper van.